February 14th, BCP meeting. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. I guess we will start with.
It is Valentine's Day, isn't it?
It is Valentine's Day, and I had 5 meetings today.
Totally forgot.
Totally forgot. Shame on you, whoever you. All right, let's start with minutes approval. We have BCP minutes on January 10th. Would anybody like to move those? Rich moves them. Greg seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. Rich John?
Yes.
Lee Shurtleff?
Yes.
Mike Lane?
Yes.
Greg Mezey?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So those are approved. And then we also have minutes from our January 24th expanded budget committee meeting. Would somebody like to move those?
I had a question.
Sure.
Sorry. On the attendance, the titles are listed. Some are members and some are legislators. Is that what's that the result of?
Well, if you're a member of the committee, you're listed as a member. And if you're not, well, that's very strange. You're right.
I will go ahead and correct that, Deborah.
Say what?
I'll go ahead and make that correction to those minutes.
Yeah.
Point of information, do we need the expanded budget committee to vote on this minutes approval, or can we do it as a subset?
No, I think that the members of the Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee routinely approve these particular minutes.
Okay.
So, can I get a motion, please? Rich, Greg, second. Any more discussion? Okay, seeing none. Rich John?
Yes.
That wave is a yes. Lee Shurtleff?
Yes.
Mike Lane?
Yes.
Greg Mezey?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So those are approved. I don't think we have any. Oh, yes, we do. We have an addition to the agenda submitted by Lisa, authorizing use of one-time funds from unassigned fund balance for vacation payout to resolve front-loading issue. The issue that it's a gift that keeps on giving. I'm not clear. Trina, do we have to vote to add this to the agenda?
No, just as long as it's consensus of the committee.
Okay. Is it the consensus of the committee that we will accommodate our county administrator? You just sort of wave, yay, that's good. Okay. All right, that is added to the committee, and we will consider that after our discussion of the fiscal rollover policy. Is there any comment from the public, Katrina?
We have received none and nobody is in attendance.
Okay, so I guess there's none of that. So we will move now to Lisa Holmes. And take it away, Lisa.
Okay. Well, first of all, I wanted to draw everyone's attention to the departmental goals that were attached to the packet. Those are from Finance Department and Human Resources, the departments which report to Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee. And again, the background is so that you're aware of what the departments are doing and so that this can inform the committee's goals as well, and so that we're all moving in the same direction. So I didn't plan to say much about the goals, but this is an opportunity because both Rick and Ruby are present if you have any questions for them.
Well, okay, let's do it this way. Let's, at this point, just confine ourselves to administration's goals, which I don't,
Administration reports to GO.
oh, okay.
So GO received the copy of county admin's goals.
Okay, all right then. I guess we'll just go through these then. Rich, I see your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, when you're ready for questions.
Well, I mean, I think we can all read these. So I think we can move on to questions because we will discuss our committee goals after we hear from Lisa and Rick and Ruby, and that's by design, so that whatever goals we propose will more or less coordinate with the goals of these departments. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Rich.
I just had a typo comment in number 11. I assume it's including but not limited to. Is that correct? Yes. The other was just generally for human resources, this seems like a very expansive set of goals for 2022. I mean, great. I'm wondering, do you think you have the resources to get there?
We are hoping so, Rick. For the most part, we've started on some, like for working with departments. I'm working with DSS now. We won't get to all of the departments, but we will make a start on it. We've already started on the buddy program and the demystifying civil service. So some of it we've already started on, but that's not to say I won't need additional resources at some point in time if it's a definite 2022 goal.
Okay, thanks.
Rich, I expected you to ask about results-based accountability, since that has been a pet project of yours.
I was happy to see it on there.
Yeah, you had at one point said we should systematize that. And I'm not sure I totally understand what you mean by that. So maybe that's something that you could elaborate on at this point.
Sure. And I'm not entirely sure what I mean by it, because I think it's very hard to implement because you've got some issues you have to balance. But in our budget process, we almost entirely focus on stuff that's over target, new stuff. Once stuff gets into the budget, I worry that it can disappear. And results-based accountability is, I think, a possible really useful tool for us to look at all the operating systems and say, are we getting value for the dollar? So that's where it could be really useful. Where I worry is that if departments know that we're using it as a budgeting tool, then there's an incentive to use RBA in a different way, to come to conclusions that, of course, everything is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And I'm not sure how you get that balance right. It's hard.
So,
Does that make sense?
so yeah, and I just want to be sure that I understand what you're saying. So we have a tendency, once something's added to the budget as an OTR and it becomes part of our process, to not really go back and evaluate it as part of our budget process every year when we're trying to decide. We always talk about maintenance of effort, but we don't often have a discussion about which efforts are worth maintaining.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I don't know what that would look like either. And then, yeah, then if a department knows that that's what we're doing, there's always the game the system.
Yeah. And the point of RBA, as we're using it now, I think, and Lisa and Amy, you can correct me, but it's to look internally. It's for department heads to really be able to see their own department and say, here's what we think we should be accomplishing. Are we getting there? And using it for this other purpose might help us have a much better view of the budget, but it would almost certainly influence department heads to think about RBA in a different way. With that said, I think as a legislature, we still have this issue that we don't look at stuff once it's target, or look at it very well. And we should think about how could we possibly do that.
I could speak a bit,
Yeah.
or just to say that the RBA is still in the goals for county admin as well. And Amy, if you want to say a little more about where we've been and where we hope to go.
Sure. So I will say embracing results-based accountability and moving this process has been an interesting challenge because like many things we do here, we do it differently than every place else. And that has been a challenge for us in this scenario because RBA really has two different ways of looking at it. There's population accountability and then there's departmental accountability. And in the best case scenario, they all tie together through some kind of strategic plan or strategic priorities set forth by leadership. And so we don't have quite that at this point, but that doesn't mean we haven't moved forward. And so what you have is departments who have defined their mission and vision as set forth in the charter, developing measures that helps them account for what they're doing towards moving that mission and vision. Where we kind of lack from other places is we don't have that strategic vision throughout the entire organization. And I think that's where we've struggled a little with RBA. At this point, because of how we phased it in, departments rolled in at different cycles. And so we have some departments who have been doing it for about 6 years now and have some existing measures. And we have departments who are collecting for the first time this year. And it's a snapshot in time. I see Ruby shaking her head yes, because she's only going to have one data point, which doesn't give her a lot of information. Over time it will. But we knew when we started this endeavor, it would take a while to kind of get that information. And we can look back on some things, but some things we're creating brand new measures. So I think it's probably one of those things where we're going to continue to look at it, have the discussions, think about how we tie it into budget and give you those snapshots. And then how we also lean on kind of the conversations the county administrator and others have with staff about what they're doing and how they're performing. And how we tie it all together. But I do think this is definitely a way to go and a smart move to use what we've already started, using performance measures to understand how we're using our finances and showing to the public how that works and what outcomes we're trying to drive with the budgets that we're creating.
Deborah, may I?
Yes, go ahead, Rich. This is your
Yeah, thank you for that, Amy. I guess the concern that we're trying to get at is if the legislature, the budget committee, really started looking at RBA as a financial measurement tool to see where we could hunt savings in the budget, do you think that would damage the RBA process? Or do you think there's a way to do that that would allow both to happen? The internal improvement process and budget accountability.
I think when we started it, it's about building trust that we're using it to improve our measures and allowing some of that autonomy by the department heads to determine that maybe their path isn't the right one at this point and to correct that or change that. So I think that it's going to be a delicate balance. I do think it can be driven into budget, and performance measures are part of budgeting because that's ultimately your biggest driver is you're putting your funding where you want to see the performance. And so I think there are ways to do it. I think we have to, and this is where that overall strategy comes into play some, because departments are developing their strategy based off of the charter or other things. If there are different legislative priorities, we have to have that conversation as well, because sometimes we merge and do things. And I think that's a piece of why we have now departmental goals and committee goals. And so you're aligning all of that together. I think it can be done. I think we have to have that trust among legislature and department staff that we want candid, open, honest feedback back and forth.
Lee.
Can I ask a question here just for a little bit of background? And Coming from formerly from the department head ranks, I want you to know I only rarely gamed the system when I was there.
Can you itemize?
Yeah, the budgeting, it's kind of interesting. I've talked to a couple about this. As I recall it, and Mike may remember some of this, but a lot of the way we've done things for the past 27 years is based on a budget reorganization committee in 1994. And it was set up based on program-based budgeting. Is that still the model that we're working under? Or have you shifted? Because your base budgets were all based on certain programs that were defined, and they were further classified through Class A, B, C mandates. And that's part of what has justified some of the over targets through the years. And if you were looking at a result-based scenario, as Rich is kind of outlining, it would seem to me that you're going to be performing evaluations in a much different manner than the way the budgeting was set up. Is that a fair assessment?
Amy's.
Start, Lisa. All right.
Yeah, I mean, one could say, if we were to measure some of our mandated programs and find that they were ineffective, we're still mandated to provide them. So your point is I think that's the point you're trying to get at, Lee.
It's part of the point, Lisa. Yeah, but you're almost setting aside the programs that have defined these departments for those number of years and accepting a base budget that now you're defining the measures within based on today's currency. And does it merit going back and looking more broadly at the programs and services that are being provided today and look at those target budgets again?
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the challenges with RBA is we married RBA with our program impact assessments, which come from that piece. And I think that, one of the areas that I know is on my goals, which are part of the GEO packet, is looking at how we're using performance metrics and how it does get into that program level. And then how does it tie into what you're doing here with budget? So I think there is a lot more work to be done, but I think it can be done. It's going to take more time. It's not an overnight success, I'm sure.
So I guess the question becomes, first of all, admin reports to GO. So what you all do with it is not within the purview of our committee. But finance has this piece, realign key measures, record and track. What do we mean by realigning key measures?
Well, this is our first year where we're recording and tracking. We've come up with we were part of the C group or the third group to implement, not because we're procrastinators, because we were put into that last group and we got to the point to where we knew at budget time we had to at least come up with the key measures, and we stumbled through that with some help from those in county administration to get us over the hurdle. We have always felt there's a certain number of data points that helps us internally to make management decisions, such as if you're looking at, we count things like number of POs, number of checks, number of items that go through the P card system, number of paychecks versus number of direct deposits, number of customers served, things, those measures that almost everybody collects that are statistics, but yet if you look at them from a management point of view, if you see, for example, number of P card transactions is 3 or 4 times what we ever anticipated they might be, that reduces the number of purchase orders and things that go through accounts payable considerably. So that would cause us to look at the personnel behind the support of the functions, and we come to find something that we already knew, but this substantiates it, is that you might need more labor, a couple or three people working on the P card now, where before it was just one, and less people working in accounts payable.
So
Vice versa.
So let me interrupt. So when you're talking about RBA on your goals, you're talking about the metrics that your department uses to report. You're not talking about the overall application of the RBA metrics and results to our budgeting process.
Yes, because those same key indicators that we use internally are the ones that we share with you, the legislature, in our report that will be part of the budget.
So you're talking about something completely different from what Rich is talking about, basically. Okay. All right, then.
Well, Deborah, maybe we could pick this up when we talk about our own goals, that maybe
Yeah.
we could try to think through this during the course of the year and come back to county administration with some ideas on how could we incorporate feedback from the departments and administration to help us make better budget decisions.
Yeah. And I guess I'm somewhat surprised, God knows why, maybe just tired, to learn that admin reports to GO. When we start talking about, which is the hugest piece of what you do from my perspective, Lisa, it just, to me, we're the Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee. I'm kind of surprised you don't report about that to us. How does that work?
Well, first of all, I'd be happy to share admin's goals with this and all of the committees. So I'm happy to do that, but I don't know. I was somewhat surprised to find that as well. Maybe someone else has some history as to how that was structured.
Well, let's see. Mike Lane is our historian on issues like this. So let's hear from him first, and then you can.
I know everyone hates it when I say this is the way it's always been, but it has. Government operations has always been the committee that oversees rather the administration and department. The budget that the administration brings out then goes to the budget committee and the expanded budget committee. But real quick, I wanted to respond to Rich. Rich is touching on something that over and over again, we have said we need to figure out a way to look at base budgets and figure out what's happening in them. As far as results-based, the one I think of most often is the alternatives to incarceration programs. When they came on, there was quite a controversy between factions on the legislature about how much it was costing and what the results were from those. And so there was a lot of pressure on the departments involved to come up with the parameters of people being served, how it was helping our jail population. The problem was you really couldn't do that very quickly. It's only now that we're beginning to understand how these programs, how many years later, a dozen years later, are really helping our jail population. And my concern would be here, if we're not careful, we can put a lot of administrative work on our departments that may not help us a lot.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be easy because as Amy has stressed, it's a really delicate balancing act. But on the other hand, if we can turn this into a tool that helps us spend our money where we get the most bang for our buck, it seems like it would be worth the struggle. Rich, you hit your hand up again.
Yeah, sorry to talk too much on this. I'm, having just finished 6 years on GO and seeing administration there is a good reason for them to report to GO. In fact, we've done a slow march through all of the policies. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them.
And better you than us.
Yeah, I mean, it was just riveting, I can tell you. But there is that whole element of GO's involvement, and it's appropriate. I think the answer here is, do we really care? We've got Lisa, we've got Amy, we've got Daniel, and connected to finance. We can talk county administration as we need to, it seems, as long as they continue to grace us with their presence. And I liked Mike's example of the ATIs, because certainly in 2018, we added a substantial amount of cost to our ATIs. And in exchange, we saw remarkable reduction in our jail population. That was our goal, that we were not holding people in our jail that we didn't need to. And we weren't seeing our crime rate going up as a result, that we weren't just putting people on the street. We were putting them into programming and really dealing with them in a different way. How do you balance that cost? I mean, everything about that is hard, and the savings aren't really savings in that we spend that much on our jail anyway. It's a hotel you have to have available, and you have to have it staffed, even if it's not full, and it's not. But there's other reasons why we don't want it full. So we have to tread very carefully going into this area, I think. On the other hand, there could be some real value if we can figure out how to do it. So yeah, longer term conversation.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a work in progress, but I know that this was an issue that you expressed a great deal of interest in last year. And of course, we never got to it because we were so busy eating bonbons. Anyway. Okay. And then looking further at these goals that are listed for finance, we've got continue revisions of certain finance department policies and procedure. I assume that encompasses the rollover we're going to talk about next, Rick.
That actually wasn't one of them, because that kind of has been joint shared with county admin since last year and this year, working on it, tag team with them on this. But we're talking about all our policies and procedures, some new ones that are in the queue for us bringing to you, and updating some old ones like on fixed assets and things like that haven't seen the light of day for a while. So that's been on our list for quite some time, is refreshing and bringing new policies and procedures back to the committee. And I think Lisa and county admin, as well as Drew and I in finance, since we all report to both the GO committee and the budget committee. We're at every meeting, or one of our representatives are. And I think I was here a year or two before I even found out there was a committee that I technically did report to. And I didn't know which of the two it was, since I went to all the meetings. And I think Kathy was the one in county legislature. Kathy Covert did the research that said that, well, if we had to split hairs, you technically report to the budget committee. And that's how I found out about it. So there wasn't a real practical distinction. If you can work at a place for 2 years and not know, obviously we report to the entire legislature on the most important issues. But be that as it may, our goals as we laid in front of you, some of them are new, some are very tedious and technical, and others are those that under continuing goals that we have to always announce and make sure that we stay on top of it, because it's the whole reason why we're in existence, to make sure that our audits go smoothly, to make sure that we do the bond sales when we need to do them, to be sure that we get the Moody's rating that we need to get, make sure the capital projects are funded with the right funding sources,
right.
Sure that we're on top of diversity and inclusion, and that's always in the forefront of our minds. And one big goal that I don't have on here, I just found out since this was written, is that I need to hire and train a new director of accounting services. Joanne gave her notice last week that she would be leaving as our director of accounting services to retire or to resign to take care of family member. And so we started the search, and we're going to be looking at a new candidate. And that's a very important position. And it puts a strain on Drew and I to have that position vacant during this audit season, which goes from now through June. And so I have to add that as number 6 to our goals, is make sure we get a good body in here to handle that director of accounting services slot.
Okay. I'm sorry that you're dealing with that. This is not a good time to deal with a staffing problem. Okay. So the reason I brought the rollover thing up was because that was particularly an issue that our committee was concerned about last year and will continue to be concerned about this year. I kind of want to hold off on the human resources goals until Ruby makes her report, if that's okay with everybody. So we can either start talking about the rollover policy now, or Lisa, before we do that, do you want to do this resolution on the front-loading issue? It's up to you.
Sure, we can get that out of the way because I think it's fairly straightforward. And sorry it was not included in your packets. We were doing the final calculations from the actual use of vacation at the closeout of 2021, so it took some time. Basically, this resolution is a result of finding out after the finalized 2022 budget that what we had expected to pay for out of the ARPA funds looks like it will not be eligible to be used through ARPA funds. So it's a one-time expense that we figured would typically be paid for out of the unassigned fund balance. And this dates back to several years ago when the county switched to front-loading vacation time through the payroll software, and several employees due to that had maxed out their vacation time and were given through an MOU time to spend down their vacation time. Several of them didn't. They were given an extra year, and then COVID happened and they still didn't. And the value of that time increases over time. So the OTR was to get those employees down to the maximum level and be done with it. So that was kind of the background on this resolution.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to get this on the floor. This is a resolution to authorize the use of one-time funds from unassigned fund balance for vacation payout to resolve front-loading issue. And it's ID number 10726. And I will move that if someone will second. Rich seconds, thank you. Okay. Yeah, we've already been through this issue once when we thought we were going to pay it using our funds. So now we are revisiting it. Does anybody have any questions about this? Because if not, we will just vote on it. Rich?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. So that's done. And now we can talk about the rollover policy, which is the real stuff.
Okay, and I've prepared a short PowerPoint. It's only 6 slides to kind of guide us through and to bring people up to speed who were not here for rollover. But again, this is an issue that I know BCP started discussing last year, and we wanted to get it on the agenda early this year and prior to the start of the actual budget construction, so that we have guidance as to how you'd like us to proceed. So with that, I will share my screen. And sorry, I just need 1 second here. I'd practiced and everything, and I'm not sure why I'm not finding it. Gosh. Oh, here we go. I have so many windows open. Now I understand. Okay, so is everyone able to see my screen, Tompkins County Rollover Policy? Okay, great. So just to bring everyone up to speed, our current rollover practice makes excess funds from previous years available to departments in the current year or in the next year. And the funds from rollover may come from both the last year certified rollover, which our finance director certifies, or from a balance carried forward from previous years. And what it does, in effect, is create a system where fund balance is earmarked from the department from whose budget it came. So if there are surplus funds in a given year in a department's budget, that would be quote unquote earmarked if it fits the criteria for rollover, which means really non-personnel lines. A reminder about rollover is that the funds are all coming from fund balance, regardless of the earmarking that this policy or practice creates. The rollover funds are part of the county's general fund balance. The fiscal policy states that the intent of the rollover policy or practice is that it provides department heads with flexibility to use funds wisely. It rewards efficiency. So if they underspend, they can use those funds potentially for something else. And it disincentivizes departments from using it or losing it at the end of the year. Again, to mention here also that rollover funds are all reviewed and the use of rollover is approved by legislators as part of the procedure. In practice, there may be some unintended consequences as a result of rollover. Departments effectively manage rollover as savings for planned purchases in the future year or years. So it may inadvertently incentivize us underestimating revenues or overestimating expenses. In honesty, I haven't seen this in widespread practice, but it could be happening. It does create a sense of ownership over the funds by department. That if departments save the funds and they are then part of that department's rollover, it does create that sense of ownership. But the funds are in fact part of the general fund balance belonging to the county. Another thing that is part of the consideration here is that rollover is not considered a best practice by the Office of the state comptroller. It's not consistent with GAAP, and it should not be recorded in our budget and financial statements. It's calculated outside the financial system by the finance director. And there's a certain amount of accounting and labor that goes into this on the part of finance and county admin to maintain the rollover balances off the books. So there is an administrative piece to that. And no other county in the state has an equivalent program as we do in the having rollover. So the last slide here is asking the questions, where do we go from here? And items to consider. And this is just to start the conversation. But that any determination about changing our current practice of rollover should be made and communicated prior to departments building their budgets for the coming year, so that everyone is aware of where we're going and what the playing field is. Some departments have positive or negative rollover balances from previous years currently on the books. And so we would need to determine and communicate with departments how we would be handling those. A discussion with department heads to understand other impacts of changing the policy. And we did have a conversation with departments. We started this conversation last week with departments just to hear their thoughts on it and understand potential impacts. And we still want to incentivize fiscal responsibility on the part of our departments. We want to reward grant or other revenue seeking on behalf of departments and address end of the year spending if it is wasteful spending. And if prior to any changes, we want to ensure that our standard budget processes will address the needs that rollover met. So for example, if we found, and we did find, that many departments use rollover for their periodic computer replacement or vehicle replacement, those costs aren't going to go away. Can we address that elsewhere in the budget process? Can we create a fund for that type of periodic infrastructure replacement? And I think that departments should believe and act, understand that their needs will be considered in earnest and granted when the fiscal health of the county is good, and they may be deferred when the fiscal health of the county is not so good. So, but just so these were the considerations and kind of the jumping off point for committee discussion on this. I can stop the share. And then I guess a couple of other footnotes from this, from our preliminary discussion with departments on this topic. We did find, and you're probably very aware, those of you who've gone through several budgeting years, the departments do use rollover for computer equipment, vehicles, office furniture, non-capital building repairs, or temporary projects or programs. It's also been helpful for departments who receive state and federal funding, that sometimes the year-to-year funding is delayed. We know it's coming, but it's not there yet. So you have departments that have large swings in rollover due to that, and that should be expected if there's a change in the policy. Departments did feel that it prevented major spend downs at the end of the year. It allows some flexibility for juggling different needs. Some departments said that they wouldn't be impacted at all by a change in the rollover. And some of those departments have reserve accounts associated with their department's needs around infrastructure and so forth. But so those were some of the possible impacts. And then strategies offered by departments to address the impacts. They're seeking clear definitions about what they can ask for and what considerations would be given to those requests. Suggested to look at the rollover requests and funding over the last several years to try to identify a process to meet the needs. Again, the use of reserve or savings accounts for items purchased with rollover. Adding funding to the contingency fund in preparation for any change. And a lot of departments ask for greater flexibility around the ability to make transfers and adjustments, and possibly consider raising the limit for legislative approval on those transfers or adjustments. And consider other managerial incentives for successful administration and oversight of budgeting. So those were that kind of the flavor of the discussion. So from here, I'm happy to listen to your feedback or questions, or take from here where you would like us to go vis-a-vis any changes to considering the rollover policy.
Okay, Lee, I see your hand up.
Do you have a number, Lisa, as to cumulatively, how much are you looking at in the rollover resolution each year, or resolutions? I mean, some of it comes in the form of the budget with the over target request. Is it?
I don't have it off on the tip of my tongue. Rick may be looking it up as he's the one that certifies rollover. I could get that for you, Lee. It's several hundred thousand.
And I guess that's my point, several hundred thousand, but it's not a million. You're you know, when we look at the budget policy, we're excluding employees, payroll and benefits, and certain mandated programs. And there's some that are managed that whatever comes in goes out, what have you. You know, probably 60 to 80% or more of the budget is not even subject to the rollover. And on $190 some million budget, if you're talking about a few $100,000, I think that's probably not even 1% of the tax levy. And, you know, it's been a powerful tool for departments to use. And I can see where the negative consequences are going to be an avalanche of adjustments and a revisit to a lot of base budgets to try to plug in things that departments just have handled with rollover and finding alternative funds and grants and what have you. So I'm not sure it's worth taking it out off the table.
Thanks, Lee.
Mike Lane.
I'm sorry. I just got a note to Lee's point from Dan. There was 1.9 million in rollover in the recommended budget for 2022.
1.9 in the budget. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you still do a special rollover resolution mid-year?
Yes.
Okay, well, that helps quantify it. It's a larger number than where we started.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks for asking that question, Lee. Mike, you had your hand up.
Yeah, this is one of my pet peeves, always has been rollover. I have been opposed to it since its conception years ago. Somehow 61 other counties in New York State managed to get along without this rollover program, which I always said was a spending program that said we will spend everything that's in the budget in a particular department, particular departments. I should say. There is good planning sometimes, and certainly the smaller departments particularly probably need this even more than others. But I think that we're spending a lot of time doing the administration of rollover. And we were just told that it's not anything we can report with our audit. It's not wanted with the government accounting systems. I think it's time to do away with it. I think it should maybe do it over 2 years, perhaps, or a year. So there's lots of prior notice to the departments about it. And it is going to put a little more burden on our administration and department heads, because they're going to have to see that there isn't the kinds of extra spending that might be at the end of the year, for example, that everyone said, well, they'll use it or lose it. Good administration doesn't let that happen. Good administration makes sure that our budget is used for proper purposes and is not bloated. I think that we don't need to have this, and if there's an opportunity to vote to eliminate it, I'll be there.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else? Rich?
Yeah, I feel strongly both ways. I understand.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I hear what Mike's saying, and it's like, yeah, budgets are budgets, and what is this? On the other hand, I've heard so many stories about, it's the end of the year, where can we spend money? Because we don't want our budget to come in under, and then we prove we can live on less. It seems like if we get rid of it, we need to replace it with some system where departments know they're not going to be punished if they don't spend every dollar. And that's probably something where there can be special requests made to county administration, from general fund balance, so that's not earmarked. But there's a trust element there that has to be maintained. And maybe there's some middle ground there. I don't know, though. This is hard.
Greg?
Yeah, just Lisa, that was super helpful, that slide presentation. So I appreciate that. Would it be possible to circulate that to the group, just for memorializing the historical context? Because you went faster than I could write, so I appreciate that.
Sure.
The other question I had is, when a department has a rollover balance, I guess would be the way to say that, do they provide a rationale, justification, explanation of why they got to that, and what they hope to use it for in the next cycle?
Yes, there is a process by which departments, there's a certified rollover form which comes from the finance director. Departments need to fill it out and state that the surplus was a result of underspending or grant revenue, or there are various ways to that they fill that out, and then they state their intention either to use it in the current year, use it in the following year, return it to the general fund balance, and some do that, or just hold on to it for a future year. And then those are compiled, and they go through program committees in the summertime after the certified rollover is released to departments. So all of the program committees review and approve those requests to use them.
Thanks for the clarity.
Mm-hmm. And also, just on the PowerPoint, I want to give kudos to Rick, both Rick and Dan. Rick had prepared a very long, or very thorough, I should say, PowerPoint of on the background of rollover, and we condensed it, and Dan worked on it as well. So I just want to give credit to those guys who have been working on this as well.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Lisa, for condensing. Yeah, I mean, my concern here in my comparatively short tenure on this legislature, what I've seen about these requests to spend rollover is a sense not only of the department heads, but of the legislators, that this is money that belongs to that department. So we really don't want to say, do you really need that? We don't think this is a good idea. You know, I've never seen us say, no, you can't do that. In rush times when the county's doing well, I guess that's just fine. But when we hit COVID and we were cutting some of our not-for-profits, for example, we were cutting back on how much money the county would give them by like 20%, which really hurt some of them. We still had departments with $200,000 or $300,000 worth of rollover that was treated as sacrosanct. You know, Lisa mentioned that if we replace this, say, with a countywide contingent fund for infrastructure and IT expenses, something like that, where they could come to us and say, this is what we need. And if we can afford to spend that money, we spend it. I mean, nobody's going to deny them the things that they need. There have been a couple of instances where larger departments with pretty substantial rollover accounts have bought things that I didn't think were absolutely necessary. But I was loath to say no because that was money. And that's something I want to see go away. I think that there is a way to set up a countywide fund or in addition to the contingent fund that would be available to meet IT and infrastructure and vehicle needs. And our department heads have to come to us to ask for that anyway. So I'm not sure this would make that much of a difference. I don't know quite how to deal with the problem of a department head feeling towards the end of the year that they have to go out and spend every penny because otherwise they will somehow or another make it look like we can cut their budget with impunity. I mean, I worked for the federal government for a really long time, and I know that in some agencies that happened a lot. It's poor practice, it's poor management. Certainly, we must have some other way of evaluating our department heads and taking into account how responsible they are with the money we budget for them. We don't have to depend on a rollover carrot in order to get them to manage. So those are my thoughts. And they're worth exactly what you paid for them. So this, I guess this is going to be a discussion that we're going to focus on in this committee for the next couple of months since we to reach some sort of consensus before we get into budget season. So Rich, I saw your hand, but now it's not there. Was it up?
Yeah, I'll wait for the coming months. I had a thought, but I'll wait.
Okay. All right, hold on to that thought. Lee, I see you.
I just, and I'll hold my thoughts mostly, but you've outlined two different scenarios, or we've outlined two different scenarios. One is a larger department that has a large amount that they're coming forward with, and that generally is a result of some unexpected revenues, which present some opportunities. On the other side of that, you've got small departments that have come to rely on this. And that takes me back to Rich's conversation on results-based budgeting. are we adequately looking at the base budgets in some of these departments? And if it has become a practice for them to rely on rollover or look to that in order to get the types of equipment and other type money to keep going, then, maybe we need to be doing some reevaluation of the core functions of the departments and the true costs that they encounter and start budgeting realistically. So for longer discussion. That's
And
what
I think trying to budget more accurately is a better solution than keeping this rollover policy in place. I'm really kind of partisan about this, but as I said, we'll have occasion to discuss this again. That said, I think maybe we can move on to Ruby's part of the program. Are you ready?
I am. Are we skipping Rick?
Well, Rick's kind of already outlined his. Do you have more for us, Rick?
No, not really. I mean,
No.
it's pretty dull and cut and dry. If you've got questions, you can email them to me and I'll respond back to the whole group. But there's not a lot new there.
And that's
Well,
right,
yeah.
because I'm their only child. You guys are extra, but I'm their only child.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. You're the only one that reports only to us, Ruby.
Okay.
You're our fair-haired child. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to try to share my screen, and I think I hope I'm learning from Lisa's example. Hope I am.
Start. So far,
You see it?
yep.
Okay, so I will do my slideshow and come on. From beginning. Yes. Okay, I get excited over little things around here. Okay, I wanted to start off with basically just a small report of what I'm bringing for today, and a lot of it is included in the goals that were presented, just in a different format. But for today, there are 5 different areas I want to touch upon. The first one is the compensation study. And just to make sure that everyone received a copy of those proposals that I sent out on Friday to members of the subcommittee. Okay, good. I want to touch briefly on the 2022 wage schedules, staffing needs, which is number 1 in my goals. Our Wednesday, what we're calling the walkthrough with HR training sessions, and then the direct reports for a performance evaluation. Compensation agreement. As you know, we put out an RFP for the compensation agreement on last year. These are the relative dates. And the whole purpose of it is really an abbreviated compensation study because it does not get into the classification. It does not get into job descriptions. It is simply a review of the salaries for specific positions in the market area. And that market area is defined later on in the RFP, but it includes all positions in all the unions, which are the white collar, blue collar, road patrol, and deputy sheriffs, corrections officers. And it also includes management and confidential groups. Now, these are the groups, a couple of them, the contracts were ratified, so salaries are changing, well, they have changed. So we will get the new, once we get an award to the proposer or the vendor, we will have to provide them with a new salary scale. So from this meeting today, I want to get some direction from the subcommittee on who will be reviewing it, whether it's the entire BCP group. I have a rating form if for those who will be, and then some sort of timeline in the process that we'll use it for awarding the contract. This is just a sample of a basic rating sheet that I will provide to the reviewers. It lists the criteria as listed in the RFP, a small, brief way of rating them with the comments. Okay, the next thing was the wage schedule, and that's going to be really brief because we have the hourly rates. We were able to do that with the new HR payroll system. What we have not been able to do is recreate the salary scale in the format that it is on our website, which is why it's not on our website right now. ITS is working with our new HR payroll system in order to get it in that format to make it easier to read. But as of January 1, all the 2022 rates were in the system. So we have the hourly rates. We just have to get it in the format that you all are used to seeing. So that's coming.
Do we have any idea how quickly that's coming?
I put a rush on it today. They've been telling me for about 2 weeks that they're working on it. I've given them till the end of this week to do it. We'll see if it works.
The check is in the mail.
Yeah, but I like getting paid on time, so we'll see. So we do have those rates. It's just a matter of converting it to the format that we can put it on the website.
Great.
I'll make sure you all get a copy as we do that. The fourth thing we were talking about was the staffing needs. As I said before, I've already begun this. We did a little with the sheriff's office on last year, and now they are pretty much set with their staffing needs. We're having some issues in DSS, so I wanted to start with the problems that I knew existed. DSS is severely understaffed in quite a few areas. So we're going through a reorganization and trying to realign what we do have and then identify what we do need in the terms of staffing. So we've started that process, and we'll get to where we can identify those needs. Whether they will be funded or not is a different question, but I at least would like to have that needs assessment done. We're doing some similar work with public health and mental health with their merger. While they're reworking how it's going to be organized, HR has got to make sure all the positions are aligned with their civil service status. So we're working on that part now. The training sessions that I mentioned on last year, we are starting what we call the walkthrough with HR, meaning all specific HR topics. If we can get a training session on to help the process go smoother, we're doing it. So we're starting in March. The first session will be on our hiring process. We've gone through and streamlined that with the different forms. So that's on March 16th. And the next one will be on March 30th, which is the search process. This is the one where I mentioned that any department or even legislators who intended to be a part of a search process would go through this training. Now we're trying to record it so that you don't have to be there on a specific date, but that's in the process. But that will be done, the first of which is March 30th on Wednesday, March 30th. Then the last thing is the direct reports. You all are responsible for the county administrator, performance evaluation, county attorney, clerk of the legislature, and director of finance. Director of finance is asterisk because we started on it last year. So we're halfway through that actual format. It's just a matter of saying it's time to go and beginning it. So we will be doing the director of finance by April of this year, followed by the county attorney, I'm assuming. And then when we make our decision about the county administrator, that would be the third one. But for outline for this first half of the year is director of finance.
Okay, and I know, Ruby, you and I talked about, we're kind of in a strange situation because we used to do 2 of our direct reports every other year. But we're way off cycle now. And the only direct reports who've been along for the ride in the long term so that we could do a meaningful evaluation are Kathy, who we evaluated, evaluation that was left over from 2020 into 2021. So we don't really need to do that again.
Right.
Scott delayed. Leases are acting. We don't have a county administrator formally, and we have a brand new county attorney, so it's a little soon to do any kind of meaningful evaluation. But one thing for the benefit of the rest of the committee that Ruby and I have talked about is having like position descriptions and expectations spelled out for our direct reports so they understand what we're evaluating them on. And the reason I think that that's important is, coming out of 30 some years of federal employment, where you got interim evaluations every 6 months and an annual evaluation, and those evaluations had real dollars and cents impact on you as an employee. I've never really understood the value of our kind of loosey-goosey evaluation system for our direct reports, because first of all, with the exception of our county clerk, who really is an inward-facing employee in terms of the people she serves are we, the legislators. Our county administrator, our county attorney, our director of finance have inward-facing and outward-facing duties. And some of their outward-facing duties are things that the legislators are really in no good position to evaluate. We can't, for example, evaluate Lisa as the big boss of all our staff, because we're not staff, and we the people that would have to evaluate her performance in that way are our department heads and our staff. So we have to figure out how to have a direct report evaluation system that accurately identifies what needs to be evaluated in the performance of each employee and identifies the proper people to do those evaluations. And then we somehow put that all together, and we are able to give good feedback on how well that direct report is performing and where they might be falling short. Because otherwise, these direct report evaluations are just a complete waste of everybody's time. So I see you, Mike. Ruby, if you want to stop sharing so I can see people, that would be helpful.
Get you my happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, thank you. You too. Okay, Mike.
Okay.
Well, to some extent, you're exactly right, Deborah. These things are kind of mushy. But remember, these 4 positions serve at the pleasure of the legislature. And in many counties, they would be political appointments. Whatever the majority political party of the legislature would, in its own, with its own devices, decide who was going to be the administrator, who was going to be the county attorney, et cetera. Thank goodness we've moved away from that. But we still have the obligation of making sure that these positions are doing what we expect them to do. And so we have to evaluate them in some way. We've, over the years, tried different methods, none of which have worked wonderfully. I think we're closer to something now than we have been in the past, but I just think we have to keep trying. And it's important to try to give feedback to the folks who work for us. They don't know if we're not happy with them unless we tell them.
I'm not disagreeing with any of
They don't know if
that.
we're happy with them unless we tell So I really think that, what you're saying is right, but we just got to keep trying to work at it.
Well, and I don't disagree with anything that you've said. I just want it to be a meaningful and accurate process. And to that end, I think, though we can only really, at this point, evaluate Rick accuracy because we've worked with him consistently for so long. We can get started on defining the duties and obligations that we're going to be evaluating with our direct reports. I don't know if you want to call that a position description or something else. Yes, these people at our pleasure, but we don't want to be arbitrary about whether we're pleased or not.
May I, Deborah? What we talked about is similar to what we do in performance evaluations for staff. You always start your performance evaluation with a sit-down meeting with the employee and deciding what the goals and the expectations are so that they are very well aware of what they're being measured on. Finance has submitted some goals, so we can very easily translate some of those goals into some measurable evaluation criteria. It also includes, your process includes questions directed to the staff, questions directed to department heads that work along with Rick and finance, questions developed with community members that he's a part of the groups with. And I would also suggest even the legislators, a couple of legislators would do an evaluation, answer the questions. That way you have a 360 view of feedback from people who work directly with that department. But they're also, the employee is not unaware or surprised by what we're looking at. So we're not saying don't do the performance evaluation and even not get feedback. It's just tailor the feedback to those departments that work with that person and let them know this is what we're looking to evaluate. So you're starting off with your preliminary meeting, then you do your feedback, and then you follow up with your actual evaluation. And I think that may have more meat or more measurable or actionable items than just a general, how do you feel about this person? Or is he a good boss? Is he a bad boss? Or, I think we can direct and tailor our questions such that it gets us what we need from that position.
And certainly, Ruby, I think that all of the legislators should weigh in on each of our direct reports. And further to what Ruby's saying is that, as a federal employee, I mean, my position description and my evaluation was several pages, single spaced long. It had, specific characteristics or quality of performance elements. And then for each one, and we don't have to be this involved, but for each one, it actually defined what outstanding and exceeds expectations and meets expectations and doesn't meet expectations, what that looks like. And so my section chief, would have to fill that out for me and everybody in my section and actually give specific examples of why I was rated at a certain level. That's how involved that evaluation was. And I'm not suggesting by any means that we need to go to that model, but we need to find some happy medium between that and whatever the heck it is we've been doing. And I know it's, we keep trying to make it better, but I still think we haven't achieved a really meaningful process that truly communicates between the legislature and the direct reports where they're succeeding and where they're not. So I guess that's something we can be working on for our 4 direct reports with Ruby. Does anybody else have anything they want to offer? Okay, so circling back around to Ruby's first goal.
Lee,
Oh, I'm sorry, Lee. You gotta like wave your hand or something. Okay,
Just one
Lee.
question. Just one question, clarification. Are they all serving at the four that we saw, all serving at the pleasure, or do they have defined terms that they're appointed to? The number
They're
of
all-
years?
They're all pleasure, I think.
Is there anybody that in county government that has a set 4-year, 6-year term?
Commissioners.
commissioners.
Okay. And how do you handle those? Is there a timeline that you do an evaluation?
For the
We don't do
commission,
that, HR does.
Right.
The
Appointed by
county
the
admin.
With our consent.
So that's ideally every year, right?
We're trying to do annually, yes.
And I'll just say admin is also behind. Because I haven't done it as interim. I have not done it.
It's been a strange couple of years. I hardly expect that everybody's going to be on top of their normal stuff. There's a saying, it's hard to remember you're there to clear the swamp when you're up to your hiney and alligators. So, and we've all been.
I heard it was higher.
But just to say that we are working on the performance evaluation policy procedures as a group with county admin for all employees. We have some departments that have already submitted their annual evaluations, and we have some who haven't thought about it, but we're trying to figure out how we can help them along in the process.
Okay, that's good to know, Ruby. So now I do want to circle back to your point about the compensation study.
Okay.
Do we all, members of the VCP committee, want to review those responses, those bids to the RFP for the compensation study? Or do some of you not want to participate? How do you want to proceed? Because I don't have a strong feeling one way or another. I think there are 5 of us, and if everybody wants to do the work, they should.
I'm happy with a smaller group. I don't need to be on it.
Okay. So Lee, what was this?
No way. No, I guess I gotta ask Ruby. I took a quick look at what you had, and it looked like you had 5 sets of numbers that were all over the place.
They were all over the place. A couple of them I think will be easy because I don't think they provided what we asked for. But they were all over the place, just on my initial review.
It ranged from what, 1,000 to almost 300,000 or something.
Right, the 260,000 I think was the highest, and then the one, it was like 1,000 or a couple of $1,000.
Oh,
And I just, with 5 there, it just seems like it shouldn't be a real cumbersome process. You ought to be able to take a quick look and say if they meet the needs of what your intents were and putting the RFP out.
I can do that, but I can do that if the committee wants me to do the review myself. We just wanted to figure out if the committee wanted to be involved in it. And if that's the case, then the more the merrier. But if not, I could definitely do the rating sheet from HR.
and then you would bring it back to BCP and we would make a selection. Okay. All right. So we got 2 that seem to be really enthusiastic.
Enthusiastically, no.
Yeah. So I guess Rich, how do you feel about it? Muted. Very profound, but muted.
I do that all the time.
Sorry. It's so stupid. I don't need to be involved. I'm not asking to be involved, but if there's work that needs doing, I would pitch in.
Okay. Greg.
Yeah, I'll second Rick. or sorry, Rich, but I also trust Ruby's expertise and knowledge in this area to do the evaluation. So I think we have all of the documentation too. So if we want to read through them as legislators and bring that conversation back when Ruby comes back, we have the information. So I appreciate at least having that in advance.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I agree with Greg. This is your area of expertise, Ruby. I can look at those things, but I don't have the experience and discernment to know when I'm being.
So I will do the rating, and I will give you a summary rating sheet of my recommendations or my ratings. You all can decide from there if you want to take it to the full ledge or you want to make a decision and recommend to the full ledge. Either way, once we do this, then we'll have to talk about the money, because I don't think there was money set aside for the study.
Okay.
Definitely not in my budget.
No, we won't take it out of your budget, Ruby. Okay.
Does she have any?
Okay.
Does she have any rollover?
Do I have any rollover? You know what? There-
Oh,
No,
the
we're
audio
not
must be
using
better than
Ruby's
I thought.
rollover.
It's already gone. It's already gone. What we had, we plugged holes that were from a couple of additional activities last year that we didn't count on. So, speaking of which, I need to just say this now and will come out later. Because of the Policing Act of 2021, we are now, for our police and public safety officers, instead of just the standard questionnaire we're doing for psychological evaluations, we have to do in-person evaluations as well. That goes from $150 per candidate to about $900 in some cases. And we've got a company who's doing it for us, hopefully that everyone else is using. But the money we allocated for those testing for our public safety officers will not be enough. So as soon as we figure out how many we have, we may be coming back to you for some additional funds.
Is this for recruiting? This isn't for the people currently on the force.
No, this is only for new hires.
Okay.
Only for new hires.
Okay. Thanks
So-
for giving us a heads up on that, Ruby. You might want to include that next time you report to the full ledge too.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about that real quick? I know this is a side tangent, but just curiosity. With those evaluations, who was the written form that was provided previously before the in-person?
We
Who was
use a
reviewing them?
standardized questionnaire by Psychological Resources, which was a company based in Atlanta, Georgia. We would have the instrument, we would administer, fax it over, they'd get the results to us within 24 hours. And that's what we've been using here for a while. That's what I used in Niagara Falls for like 6 years, because the in-person evaluations, they were at the rate of the psychologists that we used. So now most of the civil service organizations have gone to Public Safety Association, which is out of Albany. So they gave us the best rate. You would think lawmakers, Albany, there's a connection somewhere in there, but that's where we are now. And we had to do this by October. Everyone who we hired after October 6th had to have an in-person evaluation.
My question stemmed from just knowing how effective this change was actually going to be, is just understanding if anybody was looking or if there's any conversation about would a candidate have passed the written test and then not pass the in-person screening, just to know the effectiveness of the in-person screening. Just curious if anybody was looking at that.
For some cases, the in-person, you know, it was said the standardized test was too standard. It didn't get into the nuances, or the person couldn't read body language, or they couldn't read, you know, those subjective things that we're looking at. From an EEO perspective, we like the standardized because it ruled out the subjective. But now with reimagining public safety and all the issues regarding the fitness or suitability of people for public safety, the state legislators assumed that we needed a more in-person thing. I don't know. I've just got my first report today from the first one we've sent there. And honestly, I'm kind of on the fence about the recommendation, because you really don't know how far to take this, or what his recommendations, I think there could be some other reasons for. So it's going to be interesting to see, because even with the recommendations from the psychologist, I've got to be the one to make the decision whether it goes to the police sheriff's office. And it's kind of a strange place to be in. You know, some things are mistakes. People make mistakes in their young age. Sometimes you just can't tell, but you have to balance the written with the in-person and see what you get. So
Thank you.
So this didn't make your job easier, Ruby?
not at all. Not only is it costing us more, it's not easier.
Yeah, another unfunded mandate. Thank you, Albany. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Ruby. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Amy, for your input. You're welcome to stay as we kind of bat around what, I'm not going to even say they're committee goals. I think it's more like what our foci are going to be for this year. But before we do that, we need to hear from Henry and or Annie about WDIC. There are two Henrys. That's better. Still can't hear you, Henry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
Fine. Reporting on WDIC, we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the goals that we met for 2021 and talked about goals that we set for 2022. The goals we met are the diversity award, which we handed out. The last meeting of the legislative year. Sorry, my dog is barking. We also created a Juneteenth celebration. We established a calendar for all notable days and heritage months. And we adopted a diversity statement. Now, in terms of what we're planning on doing, we're gonna probably add people to the WDIC. We've been working on it for a while, so we're gonna keep beating the bushes and try to find people. We're gonna work on the strategic diversity plan as opposed to the strategic diversity statement.
You keep wobbling in and out, Henry. Try to stay right next to your speaker or your microphones.
Okay. And then work on a strategic diversity plan. And then we're going to plan for Juneteenth 2022. We're also going to talk about, and I know Ruby and have done a memo on this, about the funding for a Juneteenth 2022 holiday. I've not seen the information yet, but it's allegedly coming. The real question is price tag and everything else, and whether we want to follow the state and all the other employees.
No, well, you're come back.
Okay.
Can't hear you. You need a new computer, my friend.
I don't know what to do. And so that'll be a big issue. They'll also use some of the speakers that we have on racism.
Rich, you're muted.
Henry, if you could move to your right a little bit so you're centered in your computer, I think we're going to
Okay.
hear you better. You
Okay.
got to be right in the middle. Thanks.
Okay.
Oh, who knew?
Yep. And then we're going to also look at racism as a healthcare issue. But then we're going to some issues came up where we talked about diversity training for advisory board members. And we just wanted to explore that because really there is no training for advisory board members. And so we talked about maybe having an electronic version or doing our own version or whatever. But again, doing something for people who become advisory board members, having some kind of diversity training for them so that everybody at least gets the same level of information. And then there was also finally, we talked about sort of a small group equality discussions where we would go around and have small groups of discussions about equality with staff. And we're still exploring that idea, but we're looking into that too, at least one of the ideas that we're looking into.
First of all, I want to thank Rich for suggesting that you center yourself in your computer because you're crystal clear when you do that. So that's great.
Yeah, I guess my speaker's in the middle.
Yep. And then it sounds like you guys have a lot planned for this year, and it sounds very exciting. I'm wondering, are your the small group conversations that you're thinking about, would those be like the talking circles that the community had a couple of years ago?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I know talking circles happen through the Multicultural Resource Center. This would be similar, but this would be only employees talking sort of circles where people can discuss issues of diversity or equality in small settings, or small group settings. So, but and also it would probably be WDIC led, where we would talk to people that way, and just really just sort of connect us with the diversity plan, and really sort of get out there and talk about about diversity. Now, how we would do this, how we would require people to do this or suggest people to do this, are all complications that we haven't dealt with yet. But again, at least ideas that have come up.
Do you have enough people on WDIC? It sounds to me like that would be pretty time intensive.
Yeah, it would be time intensive. We also have the Jedi group, and so I assume we could also use some of the Jedi members to also do it too, because they're always looking for things to do, and there's like 30 or 40 of them. And so we could also organize them in smaller groups that way.
You have to talk to Amy about that.
Yes. And Deanna.
All right, yeah. See if they're really looking for that much work to do. But yeah, it sounds like a good idea.
Yep.
Okay, is that it?
Yes, it is for now.
Okay, thanks, Henry.
Okay.
Okay, so we've heard a lot about finance and HR and peripherally admin goals for the year. And I guess the question is, what do we as a committee want to focus on? I have some ideas, but I want to hear from you all too. Ruby, are you leaving or are you raising your hand?
I said I was gonna go out if that was what you mentioned before.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Get back to work. Stop sloughing off.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you. Oh, don't everybody speak at once. My goodness, Rich.
Well, I think we talked about the whole issue of trying to look at base budgeting. And so I would put that on our list.
Okay. And is that going to tie in with your results-based accountability issue?
Yes, same thing. Yeah.
All right. Okay, and obviously the comp study, getting that comp study, that was a goal last year, and it took us a while, but we're getting there. We also need to hire a county administrator. I know that keeping this conversation appropriate for a public forum, the committee that Shauna appointed to consider our options for proceeding with hiring county administrator met and had a recommendation, which was forwarded to all of the legislators via email. We will be discussing that in an executive session at tomorrow night's meeting. And hopefully we will reach consensus and we can move forward with whatever path we choose. So that's underway as well. I have to admit that I spoke with Ruby a couple of times before this meeting, and I do want to tighten up our direct report evaluation process, if that's okay with the rest of you. Did we lose Mike?
He stepped away for a few minutes.
Ah, okay. Let's see what else. I think from conversations that I've had with Shauna, and I know that Shauna's discussed this with Mike, we're also going to be doing an evaluation of staff space needs. So there's going to be some overlap between BCP and F&I on that. And let's see. I would certainly encourage all of our legislative colleagues to attend Ruby's Wednesday walkthrough with HR that relates to the search process. It's going to be presented on March 30th. So that we avoid having any misfires like the one we had last year. And that, I think, is all I have that's near and dear to my heart. Well, that and the rollover, getting the rollover policy squared away. But I'm happy to add anything that you all feel is important. I will say that I don't know that I feel strongly that we absolutely have to have a long list of committee goals, because Lisa and Rick and Ruby seem to provide us with more than enough to do. And I don't want to create a goal that conflicts or adds to their very full plates. Mike?
Sorry, I had to step away.
Okay.
I don't know whether you talked about this or not, but I'd certainly like to have an update on our retention efforts this year. Something this committee's talked about over several years. And it's an ongoing process, I know, but trying to retain employees is as important as hiring new ones. Maybe more important.
I think that's fair. Anything else?
I was always taught that 3 to 5 goals is usually a reasonable number. And then when you combine it with what the departments are already working on, I think you're pretty ambitious as it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Should the recovery fund make it on the goal list in some way to see that through to fruition?
Yes, it probably should. So I will add that. I will put these all in a list and send them out to you all. And Lisa, I don't know if you want to observe the formal process that Jason instituted where, you know, the committee chairs sent you the list and he made it into a spreadsheet.
I don't necessarily feel the need for that. I think that the exercise of sharing both the departmental side and the committee side and talking it through is the most important part. So I don't feel the need for any particular format.
Thank God. I think that's great. Yeah, no, I mean, seriously, guys, I really feel like we should regard these things as the foci of our work and not as goals with metrics and measurements and, you know, check marks. So if that's okay with all of you. All right, then I think aside from the information item on the HR budget adjustment. Oh, wait, we have advisory board appointments. Okay. Do we have to vote on these, Katrina?
I do believe there was just one.
Yeah, it's appointing Veronica Pillar to WDIC.
The committee needs to vote on recommending her, and then it'll go to the full legislature for appointing.
Okay, thank you. Then I will move her appointment to that board. Can I get a second? Thank you, Greg. And I will just take a vote. Rich?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that goes to the full legislature, and I think we can be adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.